There's the brother Nahalia from the GMS Orlando camp. And I want to start off by giving all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem, Rakah Kodash. All right, double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone, who are the elders of Yashar Allah, and a sincere salutation to all you Akim, who are preaching this word and believing this word in all truth and in sincerity. And I want to go into a lesson on how Israelites became Gentiles. All right, and I'll start off this precept with this precept before I continue. This is 2 Peter chapter 3 and 15. And it reads, an account that the long suffering of our Lord is salvation, even as our beloved brother Paul, also according to the wisdom given unto him, hath written unto you, as also in all his epistles, speaking in them of these things, in which are some things hard to be understood, which they that are unlearned and unstable wrest, as they do also the other scriptures, unto their own destruction. And I want to go into this through the Spirit again, because the modern understanding of the New Testament is completely different from the actual understanding when you look at the New Testament, Paul's writings in particular, and how it relates to the entire history of the Israelites, how it relates to prophecy in the Old Testament, how it relates to history between the Old Testament and the New Testament. All right, and I want to go into that through the Spirit with some precepts, and I also have a few articles just to touch on to it. The elders of Dallas and the brothers of Dallas did a beautiful lesson going into this, particularly dealing with Romans the 11th chapter and the grafting in of the wild olive tree, which are Israelite foreigners, to the cultivated tree, which were the circumcision, the Israelites that had kept the heritage. All right. When you understand the scriptures in its proper context and the environment of the New Testament, we were dealing with a change of understanding concerning the scriptures, which was extremely difficult for those of the circumcision to understand that, which is why you catch all of this friction, particularly when Yahweh Shai was on the earth. All right. Our people were zealous for the law. All right. They believed that they were justified by the law. And for that reason, all right, they did not believe that Israelites who had left the heritage could come back again. All right. And as a matter of fact, based on that point, I want to start off with this. All right. And we are going to use Genesis, the 17th chapter, as an example. All right. This is Genesis 17, and I believe it is the 14th verse. Yep. All right. So it reads, and the circumcised man-child whose flesh of his foreskin, Salakia, apologies, Genesis 17 and 14, and the uncircumcised man-child whose flesh of his foreskin is not uncircumcised, that soul shall be cut off from his people. All right, now let's read a little bit of this right here. It says, which Jarchi interprets of his being childless and dying before his time, and which, according to some in Abin Ezra, is when a man dies before he is 52 years of age, and some erroneous persons, as the same writer calls them, thought that if a child died and was not circumcised, it had no part in the world to come. And we know that that's false. All right. The simplest and plainest meaning of the phrase seems to be that such should be cut off and deprived of all civil and religious privileges with the Israelites in the land of Canaan and be reckoned as heathens. Concerning this matter, Maimonides thus writes, or Maimonides writes, but this is the subject matter that I want to point out. All right. It says, and be reckoned as heathens. So even though they were Israelites, to be cut off means they were recognized as heathens. They were looked at as heathens. All right. And let's go into that. All right. So let's grab Ephesians, the 2nd chapter, before we go into some of the articles in the history. All right, so this is Ephesians chapter 2, and I will start at 11. All right, and it reads, "Wherefore remember that ye being in time past Gentiles in the flesh, who are called uncircumcision by that which is called the circumcision in the flesh, made by hands, that at that time you were without Hamashiach, being aliens from the commonwealth of Israel, and strangers from the covenants of promise, having no hope and without Yahweh by Shem Yahushai in the world." Now notice how this says covenants. All right. Covenants of promise. That's plural. All right. Because when you understand this in its proper context, these were Israelites who were cut off from their people because they did not hold fast to the heritage, to the law, statutes, and commandments. So again, going back to this definition, all right, to be cut off from their people, they were reckoned as heathens. All right, I'm going to grab some of the history to make this point and stamp this point through the spirit. All right, and brothers have done beautiful lessons on this already, but I wanted to go through it too in the spirit. So here's an example. All right, to be cut off from your people means that you are not recognized by Israelites as an Israelite. All right, the same example could be used for today's world and how our people think concerning culture. All right. When you think about how our people may call somebody a square, or say that they're acting white, or say that they're a Sambo or Uncle Tom. These are slurs or derogatory statements toward a person of your nationality who is not holding fast to those customs. Now, it's a low level, the example that I used. All right. You know, Jake say, "Why are you talking white?" And it's certain things that just are shots at an individual of your nation that's not holding fast to the heritage. Now, for a moment, let's go back in time to the time of the New Testament and what was actually happening at this point. All right. This is why I start off with 2 Peter's, the 3rd chapter, because when you take the face value narrative of Christianity, you lose a complete understanding of the scriptures and the will of the Heavenly Father and who the Gentiles are, most importantly. All right, so let's do this. Let's go to Matthew chapter 18, and we're going to jump down to verse 15. All right, and it reads, "Moreover, if thy brother shall trespass against thee, go and tell him his fault between thee and him alone. If he shall hear thee, thou hast gained thy brother. But if he will not hear thee, then take with thee 1 or 2 more, that in the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses every word may be established. And if he shall neglect to hear them, tell it unto the church. But if he neglect to hear the church, let him be unto thee as an heathen man and a publican." So in other words, he would be considered cut off from his people. So during the New Testament, you had this separation. You had Israelites who were more liberal in their thought, meaning they wanted to make deals with the heathens. All right. They wanted to assimilate. All right. They wanted to join the ruling class way of life. All right, because remember, we were in captivity during this time. And when you go into the Apocrypha, even between the Old and New Testament, we were in captivity. And you had a number of our people who wanted to make deals with the heathens, who wanted to leave off from the culture that Yahweh by Shem Yahushai had given us, the law, statutes, and commandments. And they wanted to join unto the heathen. The same way, in this society, you have a lot of our people who join the military. All right, they may go to these schools, these colleges, all right, and develop a mindset or a culture or a way of life that's more like the other nations as opposed to our heritage. The same exact thing was going on during the New Testament, during the time of Yahweh Shai and the time of the Acts of the Apostles. All of these things were happening at one time. Modern day has changed the understanding of what was actually going on during the New Testament. All right, Paul wasn't going to just random members of other nations. This is why he leaves little things in certain letters that give you clues as to who he's speaking to. But before we get into that, I want to touch on the context. All right, because this is Yahushua giving an example of how an Israelite by birth, by flesh, could also be considered a heathen. All right. So let's segue. All right, let's segue into the Apocrypha really quick. And then I'll add some of the articles that I have up as well. All right, so this is First Maccabees, chapter 1, and I'll start at verse 7. And it reads, So Alexander reigned 12 years and then died, and his servants bare rule every one in his place. And after his death they all put crowns upon themselves. So did their sons after them. Many years, and evils were multiplied in the earth. And there came out of them a wicked root, Antiochus or Antiochus, surnamed Epiphanes, son of Antiochus the king, who had been an hostage at Rome, and he reigned in the 137th year of the kingdom of the Greeks. In those days went there out of Israel wicked men, who persuaded many, saying, Let us go and make a covenant with the heathen that are round about us. For since we departed from them, we have had much sorrow. So this device pleased them well. And I just want to stop there really quick, because when you fast forward to today, the same conflict is happening amongst our people now. All right, the majority of our people have adapted to the American way of life, if you will. And they reject the notion of returning to our heritage. All right, to return to the law, statutes, and commandments. Because in this life they received certain benefits from assimilating inside of this society. The same way this happened in this time during the Hellenization of our nation. You have to think the same way Jake in this society will go into the army because it gives good benefits. You know, they can get a Charger, they can get J's. You know, it gives them the opportunity to see the world. So what they do is they compromise. And they look over and look past the things that they know are not right for personal gain. The same thing was happening with our people during the time of Antiochus or Antiochus during the kingdom of the Greeks. Wicked men of Israel, all right, persuaded many, saying, Let us go and make a covenant with the heathen that are round about us. For since we departed from them, we have had much sorrow. Now keep in mind what the law told us. All right, bear with me. I just want to get straight to it. All right, this is Exodus chapter 23. And you know what? Let's get this one. Let's get the other one. This is Deuteronomy chapter 7 and verse 2. And it reads, And when the Lord thy power shall deliver them before thee, thou shalt smite them and utterly destroy them. Thou shalt make no covenant with them, nor show mercy unto them. All right. And the same thing is reiterated in Exodus 23 and 32. Thou shalt make no covenant with them, nor with their gods. All right, so when the Lord told us that we were to be a holy people, he meant that. And that basically means no compromise. All right, but you have wicked men of our nation during this time. And keep in mind, this is in between the Old Testament and the New Testament. You had men of our nation who compromised. All right, and let's see how they compromised. Verse 13 reads, Then certain of the people were so forward herein that they went to the king, who gave them license to do after the ordinances of the heathen. Whereupon they built a place of exercise at Jerusalem, according to the customs of the heathen, and made themselves uncircumcised, and forsook the holy covenant, and joined themselves to the heathen, and were sold to do mischief. Now, this is important, all right, because it says they did according to the customs of the heathen. They forsook the holy covenant. So in essence, what happened? They were cut off, all right? They were reckoned as heathens. Because when you understand the time of the Maccabees, you had what is known as the Hasmonean dynasty or the Maccabean revolt. And this is when men of the nation of Israel, who were zealous for the law, gained the upper hand and preserved the heritage during a time when Antiochus was trying to destroy our heritage and make everybody one people. Now you have to understand that animosity between those who forsook the covenant and those who were zealous for it remained all the way into the New Testament. All right, the Maccabean rulership, if you will, the Hasmonean dynasty, is where you get the branch off of the Sadducees and the Pharisees. These were men of Israel who were zealous for the law and at one point became over righteous. You know, they added traditions on top of the law, statutes, and commandments. This is why Yahushua mentioned them not suffering any to enter into the kingdom of heaven, because they were making the burdens on the people so difficult, all right, that they couldn't really keep it. All right, but just to get back to the point, you had a split between our people, those who wanted to compromise and those who wanted to stay fervent in integrity for Yahweh Shema Shai, for the law, statutes, and commandments. So when we start off in the New Testament and Yahweh Shai comes on the scene, this is the environment Yahweh Shai is coming into. All right, because when you read the Maccabees, all right, our people, the Maccabees, all right, and those who followed the Maccabees who were zealous for the law, started to put to death those of our people, all right, who were aligned with the heathens. All right. As a matter of fact, I want to get that really quick. All right. So let's do this. So I'm going to jump down to verse 41 really quick. All right. And it says, moreover, King Antiochus wrote to his whole kingdom that all should be one people, and everyone should leave his laws. So all the heathen agreed, according to the commandment of the king. Yea, many also of the Israelites consented to his religion, and sacrificed unto idols, and profaned the Sabbath. And again, by law, they would be cut off from our people. They would not be recognized as Israelites. All right. So when we understand this, all right, the split came, all right, when those who were zealous for the laws, statutes, and commandments and the heritage and defending our way of life through the spirit and power of Yahweh Shema Shai, when they rose up, they put to death a lot of those of our people, all right, who were tied to the heathens, who consented to the religion of the heathens. All right. And an example of that is the next chapter. All right. So let's go to the next chapter and I will just jump down to the point. All right. So when we go to First Maccabees chapter 2, and I will start here. All right. Verse 39. And it reads, now when Mattathias and his friends understood hereof, they mourned for them right sore. All right. Because they rose up, these other nations. All right. They rose up and basically our people got put to death on the Sabbath. All right. Verse 40 reads, and one of them said to another, if we all do as our brethren have done and fight not for our lives and laws against the heathen, they will now quickly root us out of the earth. So this is the mindset of those who are following the Maccabees, all right, during this Hasmonean dynasty period in history. It says, at that time, therefore, they decreed, saying, whosoever shall come to make battle with us on the Sabbath day, we will fight against him. Neither will we die all as our brethren that were murdered in the secret places. Then came there unto him a company of Assyrians, who were mighty men of Israel, even all such as were voluntarily devoted unto the law. Also all they that fled for persecution joined themselves unto them, and were a stay unto them. So they joined their forces, and smote sinful men in their anger, and wicked men in their wrath, but the rest fled to the heathen for succor. So this shows you that those sinful men and those wicked men were those same wicked men mentioned in the previous chapter. All right, when we go up to, or when we go down to verse 11, in those days went there out of Israel wicked men, who persuaded many, saying, let us go and make a covenant with the heathen that are round about us, for since we departed from them, we have had much sorrow. So when you get to chapter 2, all right, those sinful men, all right, that are being put to death, all right, are those of our people who consented with the heathen. All right, so when we go back to that verse, 1 Maccabees 2:44, it reads, so they joined their forces and smote sinful men in their anger and wicked men in their wrath, but the rest fled to the heathen for succor. All right, so you had Israelites who fled from their own people who were zealous for the law to be amongst the heathen. So when you get to the New Testament and that time period, you've had generations at that point who had been fully set in the customs of the heathen, who had been fully converted, if you will, to the ways of the Gentiles, who had forsook the law, statutes, and commandments. Yet the Lord gave our family a promise, beginning with our forefather Abraham. And this is why Paul mentions Abraham so much, because he makes a statement that before we received the covenant at Mount Sinai, all right, the Lord had given our forefather Abraham a promise. All right, and the Lord is not a man that he should lie. All right, this is Galatians chapter 3 and verse 18. For if the inheritance be of the law, it is no more of promise, but Yahweh Shai gave it to Abraham by promise. Now, what does that mean? That means that the Lord was always going to create a provision for us to receive what was promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. All right, this is how we understand who the Gentiles are that are going to receive salvation. All right, it's not just any random nation of people that believe on Yahweh Shai. All right, because when you really understand it from a deeper point of view, those who understand this gospel are a part of the remnant, no matter what they may look like. And this is what Paul understood. This is why Paul said this. All right. This is Romans chapter 8 and verse 16. It says, the Spirit itself beareth witness with our spirit that we are the children of Yahweh Shai. And if children, then heirs, heirs of Yahweh Shai, and joint heirs with Hamashiach, if so be that we suffer with him, that we may be also glorified together. So Paul was preaching throughout all of these nations to gather the remnant of the nation of Israel. This was the purpose for his mission. It was to reconcile those of the nation of Israel who were a part of the election back to the fold. That was his ministry. All right. Matter of fact, let's do this. This is 2 Corinthians chapter 5. And I want to jump down to verse 18. And it reads, and all things are of Yahweh Shai, who hath reconciled us to himself by Yahweh Shai HaMashiach, and hath given to us the ministry of reconciliation. All right. Now, when you go to the Greek word for reconciliation, all right, it says exchange of the business of money changers, exchanging equivalent values, adjustment of a difference, reconciliation, restoration to favor. All right. So something's being restored. And this is the ministry this is how Paul describes his ministry. And who are those that are being restored? All right. Because means again. All right. It's a prefix that means again. So who is he restoring to favor? All right. This says in the New Testament of the restoration of the favor of Yahweh Hashem Yahushai to sinners that repent and put their trust in the expiatory death of Hamashiach. Now, really quick, we're going to get this word. All right. Expiatory, if I can. All right. So that word expiatory in the etymon says having the power to make atonement. So when we go back to that definition, it says in the New Testament of the restoration of the favor of Yahweh Hashem Yahushai to sinners that repent and put their trust in the expiatory death of Hamashiach, which had the power of atonement. All right. But then again, you have to look at this as well. Restoration. All right. Restoration says a means of healing or restoring health, a cure, renewing of something lost. So this is how Paul is describing his ministry. You have to understand, if Paul was actually talking to heathens, the letters would not be worded the same way. All right. He wouldn't speak about a reconciliation. If it was other nations, he would actually be introducing them to our way of life, not reconciling them to it. If that makes any sense. Now let me go to this really quick. This is Isaiah 48 and 9. All right. And it reads, for my name's sake will I defer mine anger, and for my praise will I refrain for thee, that I cut thee not off. All right. And this is the Lord making good on that promise. And this is what Paul's ministry was about. All right. It was pushing the understanding to our people, the circumcision who were locked in on the law, who were zealous for the law, who believed that they were justified by the law. And also gathering the wild olive tree, those of our people who understood the gospel, who received the message, but they were living in a different custom, the custom of the heathens, and they were being grafted back into the fold. All right. This is Isaiah 1 and 9. And it says, I'll start at 8. And the daughter of Zion is left as a cottage in a vineyard, as a lodge in a garden of cucumbers, as a besieged city, except the Lord of hosts had left unto us a very small remnant. We should have been as Sodom, and we should have been like unto Gomorrah. All right. So we understand that the Lord left a remnant of the nation of Israel. And this is what was prophesied, that a remnant of the nation of Israel would return. All right. Isaiah 10 and 21 reads, the remnant shall return, even the remnant of Jacob, unto the mighty power. For though thy people Israel be as the sand of the sea, yet a remnant of them shall return. The consumption decreed shall overflow with righteousness. So when we understand this, all right, in its proper context, all right, those Gentiles that are in the New Testament are Israelites who are coming out of the ways and the customs of the heathen and returning home like the prodigal son. All right, so really quick, I want to grab an article, all right, to go into how we became Gentiles, all right, particularly the Hellenization, all right. So let's go into this. And the elders brought this out in Dallas with the other brothers. They brought this article out, but I want to touch it as well to bring out the point. All right, so this is earlyworldhistory.blogspot.com, and I will start here. It says Hellenization was the spread of Greek culture and the assimilation into Greek culture of non-Greek peoples. It was a notable trait of ancient Greek civilization, an approach to other cultures that was not merely invasive or dominant, but transformative. This set an example later, followed by the Roman Empire, Christianity, and the British Empire, essentially establishing a framework within which much of Western history can be discussed. All right, because when you understand it, all right, the Greeks, all right, were Edomites. All right, particularly the Greek rulership under Alexander the Greek. That was an Edomite rulership. All right, the Roman Empire was an empire of Edomites. When you think about modern Christianity, that's really backed by Edomites. And of course, the British Empire. All right. Now, they use the same tool that their forefathers used, which is assimilation. All right. And let's get this definition really quick. All right. Assimilation says this. It's a noun. And it says, in reference to the body's use of nutrition. All right. It says likeness, similarity. It says act of assimilating. All right. Let's go to assimilate. All right. So assimilate, which is the verb, says absorb into and make part of the body. To make like, copy, imitate, assume the form of. And that's just like what our people have done in this day and age. They've assimilated to this culture. This is why the Lord said, why have you trimmed your ways to seek love? All right, that the righteous is more excellent than his neighbor, but the ways of the wicked seduceth them. And this is no new thing under the sun. All right, during the time of Hellenization, all right, this was a vehicle for our people that they used for their own personal advantage, but to the disadvantage of the nation. The same way Jacob go into the military for, the personal benefits, or, go up the corporate ladder, and he have to trim his ways to climb up that ladder, but it'll enrich his personal life. The same thing was happening during the time of the Greeks. You got to think, we were in bondage. So a lot of our people, like it says in First Maccabees, they were going to the heathens because since they departed from them and kept the law, statutes, and commandments, they had much sorrow, meaning they didn't have the same benefits as those who would assimilate. All right, so let's continue. All right, it says the products of culture spread by Hellenization included the Greek language and writing systems, its myths and religion, and its technology and art, not mere ideas, but practical and exploitable benefits. And this is what the wicked men of Israel, all right, conspired and desired. They wanted those benefits. All right. This is why they said this again. First Maccabees 1:11. In those days went there out of Israel wicked men who persuaded many, saying, let us go and make a covenant with the heathen that are round about us. For since we departed from them, we have had much sorrow. So a lot of our people assimilated. All right. Again, for those exploitable benefits. All right, so I want to go here as well. All right, I want to deal with jewishhistory.org. All right, and it's the hell in Hellenism. Okay, now it says here we went over much of the history, so let's go to the main point. The Hellenists. All right, it says this. About the year 200 BCE, there arose among the Jewish population, all right, the Israelite population, a group called Misyanam, all right, Misyanam, meaning Hellenists, who adopted Greek culture as a way of life to such a degree that almost invariably they gave up their Israelite culture and identity. And that's happened today. All right, it's the same thing. All right, there's nothing new under the sun. All right, look at this. It says, for instance, the Greeks were great believers in nudity. Their sports were done in the nude. Their bathhouses were attended in the nude. In the ancient world, the Jews and some Arabs or Ishmaelites were the only people who were circumcised. Thus, if you wanted to be a good Greek, you were embarrassed to go to the bathhouse or participate in sports. Consequently, Hellenized Jews underwent painful operations at a time with minimum anesthetics to restore their foreskin and appear Greek. All right, and this is why it says this in the Apocrypha. All right, it says, let's go to it. Verse 13 reads, Then certain of the people were so forward herein that they went to the king, who gave them license to do after the ordinances of the heathen. Whereupon they built a place of exercise at Jerusalem, according to the customs of the heathen, going into that nudity, and made themselves uncircumcised, and forsook the holy covenant, and joined themselves to the heathen, and were sold to do mischief. All right. So when you look at what our records say, all right, going into the Apocrypha, and what the history says, it goes hand in hand. All right. And this creates the understanding, the context of what was actually happening when these letters were being written. When Paul was writing these letters to the churches, you have to understand the environment. All right. Continuing. Matter of fact, I'll read this again. All right. It says, For instance, the Greeks were great believers in nudity. Their sports were done in the nude. Their bathhouses were attended in the nude. In the ancient world, the Jews and some Arabs, which are Ishmaelites, were the only people who were circumcised. And why? Because Abraham circumcised Ishmael. All right. And he kept that custom. Much like how Islam keeps certain culture or certain things that really go back to the law, statutes, and commandments. Okay. So it says here, they were the only people who were circumcised. Thus, if you wanted to be a good Greek, just like if you want to be a good American, you were embarrassed to go to the bathhouse or participate in sports. Consequently, Hellenized Jews underwent painful operations at a time with minimum anesthetics to restore their foreskin and appear Greek. All right, so let's jump down. All right, it says here, as time passed, more and more Jews not only spoke like Greeks, but took on their customs, attitudes, and behaviors, which on so many levels were antithetical. All right, antithetical. Let's look this up really quick. Antithetical says of the nature of or containing an antithesis, setting in opposition, placed in opposition, opposition, resistance. All right, so this is, let's go back to that article. So this is saying, which on so many levels were resistant, all right, to the values of Judaism, all right, which was our heritage, our Hebrew customs. Estimates are that a 30 to 40% of the Jewish or Israelite population became Hellenists. Most of the upper class was simply swept away by this tide of Hellenist thought. So were no doubt simply ignorant. It says some were no doubt simply ignorant of Israelite life and tradition. All right. So just like us, there was a point where we didn't even know we were Israelites. All right. And this is saying some during that time period. All right. Because their forefather, or their grandmother, their grandfather, they have adopted the customs of the heathen, and they were just born into that custom. Similar to how we're just born into Thanksgiving and Christmas, and because we don't know any better, it's just how we've been raised. All right, it says some were no doubt simply ignorant of Israelite life and tradition. Others, however, became vicious self-haters. The Greeks found many willing collaborators among the Jews in their attempt to eradicate Israelite heritage and install the more enlightened pagan culture of theirs in Israel. And that's why you have Uncle Toms and these and follies set in great dignity, where these so-called leaders, these so-called shepherds, pity our people not. All right, because they are really those collaborators. All right, let's go to this. This is Zechariah chapter 11 and verse 7. No, let me start up to 4. Thus saith the Lord my power, feed the flock of the slaughter, whose possessors slay them, and hold themselves not guilty. And they that sell them say, Blessed be Yahweh Bashim Shai, for I am rich, and their own shepherds pity them not. Why? Because it goes back into this Hellenization period. All right, it says again, the Greeks found many willing collaborators among the Jews in their attempt to eradicate Israelite heritage and install the more enlightened pagan culture of theirs in Israel. These Hellenist Jews hated their brethren and openly sided with the enemies of Israel who attempted to destroy the Israelite nation and faith. So you have to understand, when the New Testament begins, the book of Matthew, the time period is this divide where you have those of our people who kept to the customs, all right, who kept to the law, statutes, and commandments, and those who were enemies of our people. They were our people, but they became enemies. They made deals with the heathen, and they collaborated with the heathen to overthrow their own people. So this wasn't just a disagreement. This was animosity. It was really a war. And as we go into the New Testament portion of the scriptures, you're walking right into a split between the nation of Israel. And this is why Paul says this in Galatians, the 3rd chapter, all right, that the Christians love to use so much. This is Galatians chapter 3 and verse 28. And it reads, there is neither Jew nor Greek. There is neither bond nor free. Neither is there male nor female. For ye are all one in Hamashiach Yahushai. And if ye be Hamashiachs, then are ye Abraham's seed and heirs according to the promise. All right. Now let's get this word for Jew. Or Greek, I'm sorry. And what is it? It's Hellen. All right. All right, because what did they consider? Hellenist. All right, here it is. It says a Greek by nationality, whether a native of the mainland or of the Greek islands or colonies. In a wider sense, the name embraces all nations, not Jews, that made the language, customs, and learning of the Greeks their own. The primary reference is to a difference of religion and worship. All right. And this goes back into that divide. All right. Between the nation of Israel who kept the law, statutes, and commandments, and those of our people who forsook them. All right. Again, let's go back to this article. It says, I want to touch one more point. All right. Because Galatians, the 3rd chapter, in the 27th verse again says, or the 28th verse says, there is neither Jew nor Greek. There is neither bond nor free. There is neither male nor female. For ye are all one in Hamashiach Yahushai. If ye be Hamashiachs, then are ye Abraham's seed and heirs according to the promise. All right. And who was the promise given to? Romans 9 and 3 reads, for I could wish that myself were accursed from Hamashiach, for my brethren, my kinsmen, according to the flesh, who are Israelites, to whom pertaineth the adoption and the glory and the covenants and the giving of the law and the service of God and the promises. All right. Whose are the fathers, and of whom, as concerning the flesh, Hamashiach came, who is over all, Yahweh Shai, blessed forever. Amen. All right. So it says this in this article: they hated themselves for being Israelites and resorted to things like painful cosmetic surgery, not only to blend in better with the Greeks, but as a sign of defiance in their attempt to remove any trace of being an Israelite from their bodies. Naturally, the victory of the Maccabees over the Greeks, which we will discuss next, was a great disappointment to them. All right, when you understand this in its proper context, and then you look at the New Testament from this context, it opens up the understanding of who Paul is talking to. All right, I want to touch one more article, if I may, through the Spirit. This is actually from a book. All right, and it says the Hellenization of the Jews between 334 BC and 70 AD. All right, we know 70 AD was the destruction of our temple. All right. the destruction of Jerusalem. And this is where we fled into the west coast of Africa. We were scattered, all right, predominantly in the west coast of Africa, and we were shipped from there, all right, over to the Americas. All right, but I want to read this really quick. So this is page 531 from this book, and it reads, again, all right, if the Hellenization of the Jews of the dispersion was held in check by the proud consciousness of their superiority to the Gentiles in morals and religion, a consciousness which contributed not a little to their success as missionaries, it was also hindered, we must suppose, by that hostility which they had encountered among the Gentiles. Slanderous statements about their history and life, together with bloody assaults upon them, must have tended to strengthen rather than lessen their aversion to the entire pagan society in which they lived. There is a literature reaching back as far as Manetho in the middle of the 3rd century before Hamashiach, which says hard things of the Jews, that they were driven out of Egypt as leprous and unclean, that they had an ass's head of gold in the Holy of Holies, that Antiochus Epiphanes found there a statue of Moses seated on an ass, that about this time they sacrificed a Greek annually in the temple and swore undying hostility toward Hellenism. So this is slander. All right. And a lot of our people couldn't take the heat of being separated from the other nations and actually being treated poorly by the other nations because we kept to our heritage. So a lot of our people compromised the customs of our forefathers, the law, statutes, and commandments, and they consented with the customs of the heathen. All right. And this is just an example of the slander that they were putting out. All right. Again, it says, they sacrificed a Greek annually in the temple and swore undying hostility toward Hellenism. So this is the slander, kind of like what CNN and Fox News are doing now, all right, with us coming back to our heritage as Israelites. There's no new thing under the sun. It says that the Jewish feast, or the Israelite Feast of Tabernacles, was not different from the Feast of Bacchus, and that the Jews drank on the Sabbath until they were drunk, that their religion was a barbarous superstition and destructive of all the bonds of society. They're saying the same thing now. All right. These and similar charges made by reputable Gentile authors were not adapted to draw the Jews toward Gentile ways of thought and life. But hostility toward the Israelites, the Jews scattered throughout the empire, was not limited in its expression to literary forms. The rulers, indeed, as the Ptolemies, the earlier Seleucid, and the Roman emperors, were in general favorable toward them. They never tried to destroy them as the Caesars tried to destroy Christianity. The radical policy of Tiberius and Claudius was temporary and ineffectual. But though the Jews were favorably regarded by the successors of Alexander and by the Roman emperors, they had to suffer from time to time from outbursts of popular hatred, as, for instance, in Alexandria in the early part of the 1st century, when 50,000 were slain, and later in Damascus, when 10,000 fell. This pagan hostility towards the Jews, like the hostility of nominally Christian nations toward them in modern times, naturally reacted to increased Jewish or Israelite exclusiveness. So this is showing you the climate of that time. All right. Our customs were offensive to the other nations. All right. So much so, all right, that nations were writing slander in their literature. All right. And really putting Jake to death. All right. And these are accounts that aren't necessarily written into the scriptures because, you know, some of this is not even necessary. The Lord has left a record. All right. These are just things that the Lord has added concerning the history that he's left for us to glean from. All right. So it says this pagan hostility toward the Jews, like the hostility of nominally Christian nations toward them in the modern times, naturally reacted to increased Israelite exclusiveness. All right. But although the Jews of the dispersion remained loyal to their religion and sought to win the Gentiles to their way of worship, and although the Greek world moved by envy at the privileges granted to the Jews, or by their exclusiveness and their contempt for idolatry, often did them evil, nevertheless they were deeply influenced by Greek life and thought, to a large extent, no doubt, unconsciously influenced. All right, and that's where you had a lot of our people, all right, who began to consent to the religion of the heathens. All right, they began to assimilate. Once they saw the benefits that other nations benefited from assimilating to the Greek way of life, they decided to do the same. A lot of our people, the wicked of our people. And that split, that separation, that conflict carries all the way over into the time of Yahushua. All right, even now in our present day. All right, page 533 reads, and I'll just get this quick point. To the Jews of the dispersion, the learning of Greek was a business necessity. If they were to succeed in worldly affairs, they must know the language of the world. So you have to remember, the same way America is, and English is the language of this world and the superpower of this world. This is how Greece was before we get into the time of the Romans. And our people, exploiting the benefits, had already begun to move in that direction. A lot of them, all right, save the ones who stood zealous for the law, statutes, and commandments. All right, it says here, in the West at least, the Jews dealt chiefly in the cities, and entering into almost all the industries and callings of city life, they were in frequent contact with Greek-speaking Gentiles. All right, just like right now, we're mingled amongst the heathen. So we have to learn languages and find a trade to sustain a way of life. The same thing was happening during that time. All right, it reads, the industrial competition and association with Greeks was another agency by which the Jews were slowly Hellenized. All right, so this just gives you a little backdrop through the spirit into what was actually going on before we actually get into Yahushua on the earth. All right, the Acts of the Apostles, the letters, the epistles of Paul. This is how we have proper understanding of Romans, the 11th chapter. All right, and for the sake of time, I'm not going to cover the entire chapter, but I will start here. All right, Romans 11 and 3. All right, and it reads, for I speak to you Gentiles, inasmuch as I am the apostle of the Gentiles, I magnify mine office. All right, now he's saying that he's the apostle of the Gentiles. But he also says this again in 2 Corinthians 5 and 18. And all things are of Yahushua, who hath reconciled us to himself by Yahushua Hamashiach, and hath given to us the ministry of reconciliation. To wit, that Yahushua was in Hamashiach, reconciling the world unto himself, not imputing their trespasses unto them, and hath committed unto us the word of reconciliation. So this is the ministry he was bringing to these Gentiles. All right, and these weren't just random members of the other nations. These were Israelites who were in these different customs. They may have looked like the other nations through the mixing and mingling of the seed. All right, if Jake was to lay down with a foreign woman and time passed and his son did the same thing, before you know it, that Israelite may look like another nation. But this is why Paul said this in Romans, the 8th chapter, in the 16th verse. The Spirit itself beareth witness with our spirit that we are the children of Yahushua. All right, because you're going to have the death of our people that have ears and the blind that have eyes. That's the remnant. All right, so let's continue. It says, verse 14, if by any means I may provoke to emulation them which are my flesh, and might save some of them. All right, because this is talking about the circumcision. All right. And that emulation is basically that jealousy of Paul, who was a Pharisee of the Pharisees, a Hebrew of the Hebrews, as touching the law, reaching out to these Israelite foreigners and telling them they can come back to the heritage. After all of this conflict that went on to get to that point during the Roman captivity, all right, you have Paul, through the spirit and power of Yahweh Shema Shai, going to those same Israelites who were self-haters, all right, who have forsaken the culture, and said that they can now return. And this is why it says this in Romans the 11th chapter. Pay very close attention to this. All right, verse 14 reads, if by any means I may provoke to emulation them which are my flesh, and might save some of them. For if the casting away of them be the reconciling of the world, what shall the receiving of them be but life from the dead? All right, and the reason I want to stop there is because he says this casting away of the circumcision is the reconciling of the world. Now, you had some of the circumcision that did believe in Hamashiach and did believe the entire gospel. But you had a good portion of those of the circumcision who refused not only to receive the gospel, but they refused to allow Israelite foreigners to return to the heritage, going back into that definition of cutting off from the people. They were now recognized as heathens. This is why in Galatians the 3rd chapter, Paul doesn't say there is neither Jew nor Moabite or Jew nor Ethiopian. He says there's neither Jew nor Greek, because that was this divide, this Hellenist versus Israelite divide. All right, now going back to Romans the 11th chapter, I want to jump down to verse 26, because this deals with the olive tree, but this is how it's concluded. All right, it says this. Romans 11:25, for I would not, brethren, that ye should be ignorant of this mystery, lest ye should be wise in your own conceits. Let blindness in part is happened to Israel, until the fullness of the Gentiles be come in. All right, so who are these Gentiles? Paul gives you a clue. He says, and so all Israel shall be saved. As it is written, there shall come out of Zion the deliverer, and shall turn away ungodliness from Jacob. For this is my covenant unto them, when I shall take away their sins. So this is that reconciliation. All right, the family coming back together. All right, Romans 11 is a beautiful chapter going into the grafting in. But you have to understand that the wild olive tree and the cultivated olive tree are both still the olive tree. And this is why Paul concludes his parable of the olive tree with all of Israel being saved, and reiterating the new covenant when the Lord said he would take away our sins. All right, so I know this was a little long-winded. All right, Lord willing, it was edifying. All right, with that, I want to give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai, Ba'ashem, Rakakodash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone, who are the elders of Yasher Allah, and a sincere salutation to all you Akim, who are preaching this word and believing this word, and to the Akwath, who are believing this word in all truth and in sincerity. Shalom.